if you don't have competitive advantage, don't compete. In other words, if you don't have a plan on how you're going to win, what's the point in taking part? We all know that's true in sport, but it's equally true in business. You must have a plan on how you're going to beat the competition or how you will secure more orders, etc. I'm Mike Harris and I help businesses to successfully grow their profit and turnover. In the last year alone, I have helped over 20 companies at least double in size. And I work with a mixture of firms for small, medium and large businesses, including startups and multinationals. Today, I'm going to give you free advice on what I think is the most important thing that you can learn to successfully grow your business. That's right, free of charge. This is the most important thing, which if you can master, will help you double your business's turnover and profit in less than a year. And that thing is competitive advantage. Back at the start of season 3, I explained that there were 4 things you must focus on to successfully grow your business: ambition, identity, key challenges, and competitive advantage. In a previous episode, we covered how to identify your business's identity, why describing it is critical to a successful strategy, and that it's your compelling elevator pitch to new customers. How an effective and clear identity will differentiate yourself in the marketplace. I talked about what makes your organisation different, discussed your strengths and weaknesses, and built upon these to arrive at your identity. And the identity flows into the competitive advantage. This is the most important component to business growth. It's how you differentiate yourself from your competition. It's based upon your company's strengths. It's what sets you apart. But it's not just about winning work. It goes to the heart of your organisation, improving your performance and your bottom line. So what exactly is competitive advantage? So a great quote on this is, if you don't have competitive advantage, don't compete. In other words, if you don't have a plan on how you're going to win, what's the point in taking part? We all know that's true in sport, but it's equally true in business. You must have a plan on how you're going to beat the competition or how you will secure more orders, etc. So a definition that you'll find if you Google competitive advantage is a condition or circumstance that puts a company in a favourable or superior business position. But what exactly does that mean? Well, from my point of view, this is how I define competitive advantage. It's leveraging your strengths to your greatest advantage, using your strengths against your competition's weaknesses, using your strengths to turn competition's strength to a weakness, challenging conventional thinking, and the thing I enjoy most, doing something unexpected. The steps I take to identify your competitive advantage are the following. I brainstorm with the teams that I'm working with a long list of what they believe is their company's competitive advantage. This may include what makes the organisation different, their strengths, their identity, but often includes a lot more than that. And we reduce then a long list down to 6 items. And these need to be what the business does, or at least what they aspire to do in the very short term. We then analyse that short list and we look at it from this point of view. So a competitive advantage, is it a strength that can be leveraged to that company's best advantage? And if so, why? Is it what they do? How does it compare to what their competition does? Is it something that your customers want? Then we move on to the how. How do you turn this to your company's advantage? And how do you turn it to your competition's disadvantage? Once we've done that, we then look at the obstacles. What are the key obstacles to this being your business's competitive advantage? And then finally, we look at what are the key solutions for dealing with those obstacles. In a minute, I'm going to go up to my flip chart and I'll take you through a real life example of a competitive advantage that I did recently with a client. And then once you've done that exercise, you whittle down your list of 6 competitive advantages down to say no more than 4. And it shouldn't be any more than 4, because any more than that makes it difficult to implement in a consistent and coherent fashion. Let's go off and let's have a look at a real competitive advantage. So here I am with my trusted flip chart. And as I said earlier, we're now going to look at a real live example of competitive advantage. This is one that I did with a client recently in a workshop. And the competitive advantage that they had picked was collaboration. They felt that they collaborated with their clients a lot, got a lot of repeat business off the back of it. So I put in the challenge, you think that's competitive advantage, let's analyze it and see if it's true. So the first thing I asked them is, why do you think it's competitive advantage? And what they said was this: firstly, that their customers wanted it. Secondly, they felt they had 10 years experience working in collaboration. The third reason they gave is they felt it drove innovation. And the reason they felt that was because by working collaboratively with their clients and their supply chain, broke down barriers, people were more likely to share good ideas, the sort of innovative ideas that they had, and that by working together, that drove that innovation forward. The next one they had was it helped them win work. And the reason for that was by working collaboratively with their clients would bring them back for repeat business, get them to look at things that they wouldn't have necessarily got if they didn't have that collaborative relationship. The next item they came up on why they felt collaboration was a competitive advantage was because they could point to recent successes that showed that they'd won work off the back of it and that their customers were coming back. And the last reason they gave was because their route to market that they used, they wanted to move away from having to competitively tender work to getting onto local authority and public sector frameworks. And they felt that collaboration was key to be able to get onto those frameworks. So there you have it. That's one, two, three, four, five, six reasons why they felt that collaboration was a competitive advantage. Now, clearly, I've just written that up onto the flip chart. That took 20-minute workshop to come up with the answers, but it seemed to underpin that collaboration could be a competitive advantage. So the next question I asked them is, that is why they think it's competitive advantage. So that is the why they think it's a competitive advantage. The next question was, how did they turn it to a competitive advantage? In other words, some of their competition may also be saying they're collaborative. Why was this going to make them different? So as I say, next question, how? And again, 20-minute workshop, this is what they came up with. Firstly, it got closer alignment to their customers. In other words, by working collaboratively, they got to understand the customers better. They were able to provide services and products that help the customers solve problems. But likewise, their customers got to know them better, got to trust them, got to like them, and wanted to give them more work. The second item they gave is they felt it reduced overall cost. So the reason for that was because when they worked collaboratively with their clients, they were able to look at where there was duplication between what they did and what their customers did and take that duplication out, which therefore made savings and reduced costs for both parties. The next item they had was it produced innovation. In other words, the innovation that the collaboration drove could then be used by them and their clients to go out and win more work, be more profitable, etc. So the innovation was partly how they would turn collaboration into a competitive advantage. The next one they came up with was created long-term relationships. By working collaboratively, they built long-term relationship with the customers and they could use those long-term relationships to win more work. They could show the relationships they had with existing customers and offer that up to new customers who hopefully would want the same thing. And lastly, it helped them improve their tender win rates. They were in a market where they were having to competitively tender a lot of work. That would mean that typically they would be winning 1 in 4, 1 in 5 of the tenders they put in. Collaboration would mean they could reduce the number of tenders because by collaborating with clients, they would be winning more like 1 in 2, 1 in 3. So it drove down the win ratios, which made their sales funnel a lot more efficient. So having looked at the why and the how, the next thing we looked at is what were the obstacles to collaboration being a competitive advantage? So the first obstacle they looked at was lack of relationships. So they had some really good collaborative relationships with some clients, but new clients would take time to build up that kind of relationship. It wouldn't happen overnight. So they had to invest in longer term client building in order to be able to compete based on collaboration. So the next one they looked at was lack of resource. And what they meant by that was it took a lot of time and investment of people to build up the relationships that led to collaboration. So, therefore, the resources they need to have collaborative relationships were more than they needed for transactional relationships. So, the next one they looked at was procurement routes because not all of the routes that they secure work under necessarily lend themselves to a collaborative relationship. And then, lastly, they had the obstacle of uncollaborative behaviours. In other words, whilst at business to business they were working collaboratively with their clients, that didn't necessarily cascade down into the teams that both parties employed. So, not all of their clients' teams acted collaboratively, but likewise, not all of their teams were working necessarily collaboratively either. So, if those relationships where people were being more confrontational prevailed, then that had a risk of actually jeopardizing the long term collaborative relationship. So, those were the obstacles and a few others that they came up with, but were the top four. Then the next thing we looked at was if they are the obstacles, what are the solutions? So the first solution was to go and find like minded customers. So obviously, the customers they were working with, which they already had the collaborative relationships with, that was fine. But when they were looking for new customers, they had to home in on those that already operated in a collaborative fashion. The next solution they had was to build closer alliances earlier with their clients. Another solution they had was to invest money into training up their staff to have collaborative behaviors. That they needed to lead by example as a business and they had to behave like a partner. And the last one, and probably the most difficult one, was they had to walk away from customers, both existing and potential, that were not going to work with them collaboratively. Apologies for my handwriting, as I always do on these shows. So there you go. They were the solutions that they came up with. There were others as well. As I say, these tended to be 20-minute sessions each one. But at the end of it, having spent pretty much a day looking at competitive advantage, and not just on collaboration, but on three other items as well, they were able to show, yes, collaboration was competitive advantage. They could show how they were going to use it as competitive advantage, look at what the blockers were going to be, and come up with solutions. So that's a good example of how to arrive at a competitive advantage. Obviously, sometimes you start the analysis and you don't get to the end because you get to a point where the answer is no. No, actually, it's not competitive advantage, or we can't use it as competitive advantage, or the obstacles are too great. And when that happens, what you need to do is stop, chuck that one in the bin, and then start working on the next one. And very soon you'll come up with 3 or 4 competitive advantages that you can use within the business to go and win your work, make you more profitable, and develop great operational practices. So there you are. We're going to go back now to the studio and we'll do a summing up. So that's it. That's an example of how we arrive at a competitive advantage. Obviously, sometimes you do this analysis and you don't always arrive at a yes when looking at a competitive advantage, but that's not a problem. Go and look at other items, look at your long list again and see what else is on there. And once you work your way through, you will end up with 4 competitive advantages. So in summary, your competitive advantage is how you differentiate yourself from your competition based on your company strengths. It's what sets you apart. It should be what your customers want, benefits them as well as you, something that you do or at least aspire to do. Experience shows that it works. It's difficult to replicate, makes you more competitive, but it's not just about winning work. It should go to the heart of the organisation, improve your performance and your profits. As you know, I like to set some homework. So today's homework is this. With some colleagues, go off and brainstorm your competitive advantage. Start with that long list, narrow it down to 4. And then just as I did a bit earlier, analyse them against the criteria that we spoke about and use them to get to your competitive advantage. And then roll it out into the business, test it, see if it works. Use it in tenders and bids, use it in sales pitches, use it in your conversations with clients. You'll soon see if it's working and it's bringing you in new orders and it's helping growing the business. Get this right. As I said earlier, this is the most important thing to scaling up your business. I find with the clients I work with, once they've got the concept of competitive advantage in their minds, they know how to use it, and they pick the right 4 items, they're able to use that on a scale that they've not been able to do before. As always, I'd be interested to see your comments, see how you get on. So leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. You can message me directly on LinkedIn or email me on the email address that you see here. And don't forget to like and subscribe by clicking on the bell icon for more valuable insights into leadership and strategy. And share this with colleagues who you think might benefit from this understanding of competitive advantage. Just a quick reminder of where you can find us. You can watch us on the Leaders and Strategy YouTube channel, listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon, Podbean, Podchaser. We upload every episode onto LinkedIn and onto the website. We've now got the Leaders and Strategy blog running, which captures the highlights from each episode. And we've also got the Shorts channel, How to Grow Your Business, where there'll be clips from this episode. So that's it for today. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and found it useful, and you'll come back and join me next time when we'll be looking again at another subject that will deliver you significant and sustainable growth. I'll see you then.